Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all of the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Sometime later, Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker offended their royal master. Pharaoh became angry with these two officials, and he put them in the prison where Joseph was, in the palace of the captain of the guard. They remained in the prison for quite some time, and the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, who looked after them. While they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. "Why do you look so worried today?" he asked them. And they replied, "We both had dreams last night, but no one can tell us what they mean." "Interpreting dreams is God's business," Joseph replied. "Go ahead and tell me your dreams." So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. "In my dream," he said, "I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon they produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." "This is what the dream means," Joseph said. "The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so that he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I am in prison, but I did nothing to deserve it." When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, "I had a dream too. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastries stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head." "This is what the dream means," Joseph told him. "The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Then birds will come and pick away at your flesh." Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all his officials and staff. He summoned his chief cupbearer to his former position so that he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Let's face it, life is unfair. We all know this well. Sometimes our misfortune is because we have made bad choices in our lives. However, there are many things that happen to us that aren't our fault. Many of us have had the tragic consequence of having someone else's sin come upon us. And for each person in our group, there are times that we come upon circumstances that are simply the result of living in a fallen world, no matter how good we may be. Joseph was the favored child in a dysfunctional family. We have already established that there was lots of jealousy between Leah and Rachel. I am sure that just flowed down through the brothers. But when Rachel had her own baby, well, perhaps that was a game changer. Maybe it brought all the brothers a little closer because they all had one thing in common. They did not like their little brother. We know that since the beginning of time, Satan loves to use jealousy to cause division in God's people. The serpent talked Eve into eating the apple by telling her that her eyes would be open and that she would be like God, knowing both good and evil. That was a jealousy hook, and Eve took it. She lacked the wisdom that God had, and she wanted it. Then there was the whole mess between Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel over a jealous heart. Over and over again, we see the green-eyed monster rise up and make a big mess out of things. It got a hold of Joseph's brothers too, and the result was they wanted to kill Joseph. However, they ended up selling Joseph into slavery instead. A peaceful heart leads to a healthy body. Jealousy is like cancer to the bones. Sure, Joseph was favored, and yeah, he may have been a brat. However, did Joseph really deserve to be sold into slavery? But the Lord was with Joseph. These patriarchs were jealous of their brother Joseph, and they sold him to be a slave in Egypt. But God was with him and rescued him from all of his troubles. The thing is that God didn't rescue Joseph so that he didn't have any troubles. It is very dangerous to stand on the belief that God will save us to not have any trouble. In what I know of the Bible, God has made it incredibly clear that his people would go through hard times. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. The righteous person faces many troubles, but the Lord comes to rescue each time. When troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Last week, Shirley covered these verses. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From that day, Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property. The Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibilities over everything he owned. My mom shared this in Session 5, Lesson 2. Jacob would have heard the stories of his grandfather Abraham. Passing down their history from one generation to the next was serious business to the patriarchs. They carefully retold their history to preserve the detail and their heritage. She goes on to say, God had spent 20 years refining Jacob's character while he worked for Laban. Jacob was a deceiver who lacked perseverance and honor when he first ended up in Bethel. But after being deceived by Laban when Leah was given instead of Rachel for the first 7 years of his service, Jacob had a new sense of perseverance to get what he wanted. Jacob also had a fresh understanding of the harm deception brought. He learned to treat Laban with honor even though he didn't earn it. Yes, Jacob was now ready to embrace the name Israel, a determined man who will fight for what is right and follow God completely no matter the sacrifice. Because Joseph was favored by Jacob, it is extremely likely that Joseph spent much of his time with his father. As Jacob went about his day, I am sure that he shared with Joseph all the stories and miracles that had taken place in his history. Jacob probably told all of the times that God had appeared to him. I have spent many years sharing with my kids, especially my girls, about my past. I've shared with them the different times that God has shown himself faithful, the miracles that has been performed in my life, and yes, I have even shared about my own sin and the destructive road it led me down. Why do I share these things with them? Because my greatest hope is, number one, my kids will have a personal relationship with the Lord, and two, because I want to help protect them from the sin I chose to embrace. I want to be very real with them why I fell into that sin, so that they can be careful in their own lives to not do the same. We as parents try to guard them from walking through the pain we have gone through by teaching them right from wrong, by telling them how to see the warning signs in other people in hopes that they will be protected from other people's sin. I think it is very possible that Jacob shared the lessons he learned in honoring Laban, even though Uncle Laban wasn't very honorable. Jacob probably shared the times he failed in this and the times that God blessed him when he did trust the Lord. Joseph was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery. The next age we see is when Joseph is 30 years old. So here is Joseph somewhere between the ages of 17 and 30. He has worked honorably for Potiphar and has been placed in charge of his household. Then things turn on Joseph. Potiphar's wife tries to entice Joseph. Joseph does what is right in the eyes of the Lord and runs away. Yet Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph for raping her. And all the hard work that Joseph did, all the dirty work he had to do to show that he was worthy, all the long hours, all the trust built between Potiphar and Joseph was broken in an instant. And Joseph gets thrown in jail. Where is God in this? I wonder if there were times when Joseph stomped his feet and cried because how could God allow this to happen to him again? First getting thrown into a pit by his brothers, and now to be thrown in jail for something he didn't do. But the Lord was with Joseph. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Something that has always stood out to me about Joseph and that I find completely amazing is how he was favored by his authorities. Yes, he was favored by Potiphar, and Joseph was placed in charge of Potiphar's entire household. That's extremely impressive. Then Joseph is accused of something he didn't do and gets thrown into jail. He becomes favored by the prison warden, and Joseph is put in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happens in the prison. And spoiler alert, Joseph in time becomes favored by Pharaoh and is put in charge of Pharaoh's court, and all the people will take orders from Joseph. I am sure that Joseph had to prove himself with his servanthood to become Potiphar's household manager. I am sure there was a lot of dirty work that he had to go through to even be noticed. When I worked outside the home before I had children, I often witnessed that lazy, spoiled brat kids were not the manager's favorite. They were annoying and complained about their jobs often, and typically ended up fired shortly after being hired. I also witnessed that those workers who did just that, worked, were the manager's favorite. The employees that easily got along with others and who did whatever they could to serve those who were around them. They were the ones that the boss would be able to count on. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Try to please them all the time, not just when they are watching you. As slaves of Christ, do the will of God with all your heart. Work with enthusiasm as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. Remember that the Lord will reward each of us for the good we do, whether we are slaves or free. There's a fantastic book called Undercover by John Bevere. It is a great book that teaches how to serve ungodly masters or those we don't feel are leading well. Lisa Bevere even shares a bit about how to serve husbands and how to respect their leadership even if we as wives don't feel like they are leading well. If you are a reader, I highly recommend it. As I was studying for this lesson, this verse jumped off the page. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. Each step that Joseph took from the moment he was thrown into the pit took him on his own personal journey towards having a relationship with the God of his forefathers. He was about to experience firsthand what he learned as a child. Even though his circumstances stunk, Joseph still made the best of the situation and proved that he was a very honorable young man. Over and over again, we see the Lord was with Joseph. The truth is, no matter what we face in life, God has promised to always be there. I love the lyrics of Oceans by Hillsong United. You've never failed and you won't start now. God is faithful. When we trust Him for our outcome, we will always find Him faithful because He promises to be faithful. There have been times in my life when I have gone through such devastating trials that I started to doubt God's love and faithfulness to me. I'm trying to do my very best, Lord. I am serving in church. I am changing my life to be as righteous as I know how to be. I am trying to trust you with all that I am, but still, I feel like you are just this mean kid who is ripping off my wings and trying to burn me with a magnifying glass. These were my words in 2009. And that feeling just grew in 2010 when baby number 7 went to heaven before me. I couldn't figure out why these things kept happening, but it was a worship conference in October 2010 that changed everything. I once again committed to stop doubting God's love for me and to just accept that He was walking with me and that He was the one who held my world in His hands, and that I would trust Him no matter what was going on in my life. I didn't know that I would eventually have a beautiful, healthy baby girl in my arms in 2 years. But what I did know is that God loves me. God is for me. God has never left me, and He never ever will. It is this hope that we need to hold on to. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him His faithful love. Take this verse and make it personal to your situation. But the Lord is with me in blank and shows me His faithful love. Don't be afraid, for I have ransomed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through many rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you.